pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
How many believe it's time for America to quit pretending we're not Christian? And if there's people in King, North Carolina who don't like that, there's lots of places you can move to. And if you know who they are, encourage them to move.
I was out of town when it first started, and when we came back, my wife and I were driving through town, and we see all of these Christian flags on everybody's mailbox, and they have a banner in their yard, and they have a banner on their car and a bumper sticker.
Being a television journalist, you hear from people all the time with story ideas. But when your friends call you and say, you need to check this out, I knew something was going on. In a matter of 2 days, I had my phone blowing up with people calling me, telling me, did you hear that they took down the Christian flag?
There's more involved than just removal of the Christian flag from a veterans memorial. They basically come out here and desecrated a veterans memorial on the fear of the ACLU. Now something ain't right with that picture.
It's persecution. In my opinion, it's turning into persecution against the Christians.
You're calling this an anti-Christian fight. That's just completely untrue. If there was an Islamic flag up there right now, I'd still be saying the same exact thing I'm saying right now, only you would be standing right with me. Where's the difference? No religious flag belongs at a public, taxpayer memorial, regardless of how much private funds went into it.
When you're out in the woods and you see some dogs, the worst thing to do is run. Because the first thing the dogs are going to do is chase you. And that's analogous to what I think happened here.
Well, of course, when I came back from Afghanistan, the memorial was already in place. The dedication, I think, was that year, 2004, if I'm not mistaken. But you know, it's a very nice memorial. You know, I commend the people for the honoring veterans. And you know, it's a nice place to visit and to sit and remember those that were lost in Afghanistan and the ones, a few of the soldiers in our unit that we lost when we got back.
They were wanting to establish a country where we could worship Jesus Christ freely. It was Jesus Christ. It wasn't any religion. It was Jesus Christ. The first act of the Continental Congress was to print the King James Bible in English to be given to every immigrant entering the country so that they could have an opportunity to know who Jesus Christ is.
This is revisionism. They didn't purchase 20,000 Bibles.
If we went to a Middle Eastern country and we were broadcasting our dislike of the Muslim symbols or things like that, we probably wouldn't be around very long. They certainly wouldn't take them down for us.
Well, that's exactly what Newt Gingrich said about the mosque near Ground Zero. It's not really at Ground Zero, but the mosque near Ground Zero. He said they would never allow this in Saudi Arabia. And the answer is, you're correct, but Mr. Gingrich, which type of religious freedom do you want? Do you want religious freedom like Saudi Arabia, or do you want religious freedom like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison said it? I mean, it just strikes me as a crazy statement to say they wouldn't allow this in Saudi Arabia. So we want to adopt the Saudi Arabian mentality.
Our country was established as a Christian nation. It sure was. In fact, many of the founding fathers were also members of the Bible Society, missionary societies. They were Christian men who were interested in doing Christian works in this nation. The largest church in Washington, D.C. for the first, I don't know how many years, but for a number of years, up through several presidents, all the way through Thomas Jefferson and several more, the largest church in Washington, D.C. was the Capitol building. That's where they held worship services.
To say that we're going to have a public building when it's not being used for public services, public purposes, we're going to allow it to be open on a non-discriminatory basis. That's very different from saying Congress held church services in the House of Representatives. So again, you got a small truth and a large lie built on it.
And in fact, it was Thomas Jefferson who didn't like the music, who brought in the military band to play the hymns for the Sunday morning worship services.
We know that the Marine band occasionally showed up and apparently played very bad music, was what the record indicates. No indication of whether the Marine band is there in their official capacity or whether some guys just simply show up with their instruments. No indication that Jefferson ever has anything to do with it.
So I think if you look at the true history of that, it speaks for itself.
I started noticing a central theme that the city-sponsored services was starting to take, and that was one of just being Christian.
There's nowhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights that it says anything of separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state, as the gentleman said, is not in the Constitution.
Well, it's in the First Amendment, and what you're talking about, if you want...
No, it's not.
Well, no.
Those words may not be in the First Amendment, but the principle of separation of church and state was certainly in the founders who wrote the First Amendment. I mean, they understood from their experience here in the colonies in Virginia, of all places, right across the river. You know, what happens when religious enthusiasm and coercive government power come together? Somebody always gets hurt.
I greeted her with a Muslim greeting that they do in Afghanistan, Assalamu alaikum, and she returned the greeting also, and I spoke with her for a few minutes, and I welcomed her to be at the service. But what struck me as very odd was that for people who are of the Christian faith at this service were looking at her with disgust. And I'm going, she's there honoring our soldiers. In fact, her father-in-law was having a tile placed at the memorial. So she was there honoring him as well.
Well, to put it simply, the Muslims are on the move. The Muslims are intention, as far as my understanding is concerned, is to dominate. And that's what we're up against.
Well, I mean, if I'm a devout Muslim and I really believe the Quran, I'm to kill the infidel. Well, who is the infidel? Well, anybody that says there's any God other than Allah and any God that says there is any other prophet other than Muhammad. That's what I have to do if I'm a devout Muslim. Those people that flew the planes into the World Trade Centers, they were devout. They were devout Muslims. They believed the Quran.
The people who have the most fear of Muslims and animus towards Muslims are people who don't know a Muslim. They haven't even interacted with them.
These are a bunch of barbarians, and I know that won't set well with some people hearing that, but I'm just relating what my professor told me.
I'm not one of these conspiracy theorists, you know, but I really don't believe he's an American citizen. I believe he was born in Kenya, and I believe he's Muslim, and I believe he's a great counterfeiter.
But Barack Obama's as dumb as a freaking rock, dude.
And what do you think his religious views are?
Muslim, he said it. I don't even believe he's a U.S. citizen.
Take a stand. He is Muslim.
I believe he's Muslim.
I think that one could easily question, you know, his Christian faith, but you know, will we ever know for sure that he's a Muslim? We'll never know for sure. I don't think that he'll ever come out and make a public statement and say, yes, I am, or no, I'm not.
He stated to me that, did I really want to go there? And I asked him, what do you mean, do I really want to go there? And he stated to me, well, you're going to answer for this before God and Jesus Christ one day. I said, well, not quite, but you're not supposed to be discussing this with me concerning religion. You're a public official. I'm a citizen and a taxpayer of the city, and I'm expressing my concern concerning the city's position on religion. And that as a public servant, you're not in a position to preach to me or advise me concerning religion or religious beliefs in your official capacity, and this phone call was in that official capacity. And so that basically ended the conversation. He hung up on me.
There's 10 people here that say that don't want that flag back up. There's 100 over here that says they do. How are we governed? We are governed by the majority.
I think the majority should rule in this country. The majority rules in this country. That's how this country was brought about.
And so even if there's 51 Muslims and 49 Christians in the school, should they have the majority and be able to say we're going to do our prayer to Allah?
It's not a majority rules, we're a Christian nation. We were founded that way. If I went to Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't expect to have Christian prayer in school. I would expect Muslims. But we're a Christian nation. And so when they come here, they're not forced to become Christians, but they need to say, you know, hey, I'm in a Christian nation and this is the way it is.
Sandra Day O'Connor, former Supreme Court Justice, says that these rights are counter-majoritarian. They're there to ensure the rights of the minority against what is sometimes the tyranny of the majority.
Almost 20 years ago, there was an incident in one of the largely Vietnamese Buddhist communities on the Gulf Coast of Texas. A majority of Buddhists took over the school board. I mean, they were elected to the school board, all legally and honestly. They decided they wanted to have Buddhist prayers at the beginning of schools. Well, guess what happened? A lot of Christians in town went to the Texas ACLU and said, stop this.
Americans United and the ACLU said that they were interested in the case and that to go ahead and write an official complaint with them, which I did. And then they would pursue the matter as an anonymous individual.
I firmly believe with this minister over here that these people who have initiated this complaint that the Christian flag be taken down, they have remained anonymous. I agree that they are cowards and that they should come forth and let we who believe in it see who they are.
We got involved. We put our names down.
We decided to put our names
because
down.
they were abusing that Afghanistan veteran for going anonymous. Well, he should be anonymous. The witch hunt that's going on,
and that
we have seen the blogs going out there. We have seen our names reprinted over and over and over again. We have seen her place of business posted. What is the implication there? What are they trying to do?
Mr. Burnett called me a coward, and at that time all of them voted to keep the flag up. So after the lawsuit was basically threatened, I guess, by the ACLU and Americans United, that they then took another vote and decided to take it down, that the lawsuit to defend it would be too costly for the city.
The silent majority is the Christian people, and they have to start standing up and waving the flag and really fighting for what is right.
I'd like to have all veterans stand. And I want to remind each one of you of something. I want to remind you, each one, when we took the oath to fight and defend this country, did it say under Muslim or did it say under God?
Under God.
Is it a Christian nation?
Yes.
Did we fight for a Christian nation?
Yes. Right.
Not a Muslim nation. Let's make that clear. That was a sworn statement we all took. To defend this country with our lives as a Christian. Not a Muslim nation. If they want a Muslim nation, let them go back to Muslim nations and let them serve their God. Amen. Our God is Jesus Christ. You can believe in anything you want. You have chaos. Nothing but chaos. That's why it's one. It's not several. It's one nation under God. Don't forget it.
The issue just lit a fire under so many people, and they became so passionate about it. And, you know, I remember the pinnacle of the story was that Saturday morning when thousands of people showed up to march through the streets of King. And I think that says a lot about people and their willingness to take a public stand for their faith.
We need to protect our heritage. Again, you can look around the world. You don't see a lot of Muslim nations pretending they're not Muslim. How many believe it's time for America to quit pretending we're not Christian? And if there's people in King, North Carolina who don't like that, there's lots of places you can move to. And if you know who they are, encourage them to move. There's no lawsuit against King, North Carolina unless a citizen is willing to bring it. And how many believe no citizen should bring that kind of lawsuit?
You know, we're Americans. We're born in this country. I defended this country. I put my life on the line for it, and would have gladly given my life for the Constitution, my family, friends, and for people I don't even know. But for somebody to tell me that, or tell the community that, hey, run these people out that don't agree with you, that's not America. Not the America I know.
The kids at school told me that those signs mean that all the Christians are going to beat up all the atheists. And there's going to be a fight, and they're going to beat up all the atheists, and they'll put that flag back up. He said, when are they going to come beat us up, Mama?
It was very difficult to find people, because as a journalist, the one thing you want to do is make sure your story is balanced. You have people on both sides. And there was a small group who believed that flag should not be there. And I contacted many of them. We had one who was willing to be interviewed, and we were going to go interview them, and they didn't show up. And for whatever reason, but yeah, it was very difficult to get them to talk, to share their opinion, their side.
And do you think it's just out of fear?
I think a lot of it was fear, yeah. You know, I think in the beginning they said, yes, we'll do it, and then they started thinking about it, which is a nightmare for journalists, when you give people a chance to actually think about it.
These are people who are afraid. We represented a young woman lawyer in Alabama, when Judge Roy Moore put up a giant 5,000-pound kind of structure of the Ten Commandments. One day she comes back to her house, all of her windows are blown out with gunfire blasts. Well, you know, that kind of upsets you. She lost every one of her clients when it became clear she was our plaintiff. We were representing her in that case, challenging what everybody knew was wrong. But the Supreme Court didn't even consider the case. They just said, of course this is wrong, and ordered that 5,000-pound granite monument removed. But there's a price to pay. People of courage do pay price.
When Chad initially came to my door, of course I said they had the wrong person, and I was basically starting to fear for my family, for myself, and for our safety in the community. You know, then of course Chad showed my house, and then actually the street sign that I lived on, and then from there on it was, you know, I'm the one.
It took one person to cause this whole mess to start, and unfortunately we should kick the guy's butt. We should, and extend a Christian hand to pick him up off the ground after we beat the crap out of him. I mean, that doesn't sound very Christian, but you know what? I'm tired of turning the other cheek. I am.
I had to go to his door where he wouldn't speak, and most of it was through his attorney, but he wouldn't grant an interview. His attorney said he feared for the backlash that he would get, that his wife was a public school teacher, and that he didn't want any harm on her either. So.
Do you think that his fears are justified in knowing the people in this area, or do you think that he was more paranoid then?
I don't know. Yeah, I just don't.
I think it was a total disregard for my safety and my wife's. I think we were very lucky that nothing happened. And that if something had happened to me or my wife or my family or my home, that they'd have been responsible for that. I think that was, on their part, sensational type journalism and irresponsible journalism.
The general concepts of it were giving charity, being charitable, all of that, and it's been twisted out of whack. And I think it's, you know, I think the idea was great.
Oh yeah, that's great.
And the magic was good. You know, it was good enough to make people then believe in it. And I think it just spun out of control.
So you think those are kind of tricks, not real supernatural events?
Yeah.
I don't think any of us had any idea what, you know, the turnout that would come. And it turned into a 30-day vigil, and then it's carried on since the first 30 days after the rally that we had. We've had a lot of prayer services up here, a lot of spontaneous prayers. People have gotten saved up here. So the Lord's been doing a lot of amazing things through the controversy, which He's really good at. I've preached up here 2 or 3 times, and they would say, well, Robin, why don't you start a church? Within that short amount of time, it just all came together. We were able to meet at the coffee shop. We had 26 people this morning. Today was our first service. We had 26 people come, and the Lord was there. I mean, it was just awesome. And what's so amazing to me is that this group of people comes from such a wide variety of backgrounds and different denominations, which is kind of interesting, bringing us all together. They're used to different worship styles, but it's just all blended because, you know, we're all going to be together in heaven.
You know, maybe we could say what is right and what is wrong. I mean, following God's laws is the essence. So you follow God's laws, that's the right thing to do.
Is the Bible a good guide to morality?
It is the only guide. It is the, you know, the beginning and the end.
You know, Jesus says you'll know them by their fruit. And you look at the fruit of the situation. And, you know, if the fruit is murder and death and persecution and oppression, I can promise you that's not a law from God. It's just not.
I don't believe God ever sanctions slavery. God allowed it because we put ourselves, human nature, sin, put us in that fallen world. I don't think He would ever sanction it.
Well, it says
where
Leviticus.
Okay. You're right. It says, and as for your male and female slaves, whom you may have from the nations that are around you, from them you may buy male and female slaves. Moreover, you may buy the children of the strangers who sojourn among you, and their families who are with you, which they beget in your land, and they shall become your property. Why He allowed this, I don't know. I don't know. It was a privilege for His people. I can't answer for God. I don't know.
Fairness is in the Bible. The truth is the Bible, period. And it tells you exactly what you should do for your fellow man.
I guess the question is if this was really written by God, or if this was a law that maybe got slipped in there by slaveholders or something.
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I believe God inspired every word.
As the religious groups of this world argue with each other, irreligion and atheism is taking over. And we see that in pornography, in drug abuse, in broken marriages. We see so many symptoms of godlessness in this world while the so-called religious people fight with each other. This is a problem.
Some of the most moral, nicest people, the most generous people I know are atheists.
Absolutely.
They are the ones, because you only have yourself to answer to. If I screw up, if I hurt somebody, I can't go and pray and get forgiven by somebody and feel better about myself. If I hurt you, then I only have you to answer to. I can't go and be forgiven by Sky Daddy and make myself feel better, but never ask you for forgiveness of myself. You know, I have all of my stuff on me.
And so what Islam did was to even elevate the freeing of slave to a spiritual act. it meant that this could be done. It was you were encouraged to do it. If you were sincere about your spiritual well-being, free a slave. Because if you've made an oath and you've broken the oath, well, the way to get this off, expiate the sin, free a slave.
Well, why not just say you're not allowed to hold any slaves at all?
Well, that's not for me to question it. It didn't happen like that.
Why would God okay slavery? Doesn't that seem really immoral of a thing?
Yeah, from the outside, it certainly does. It certainly does. You read the Old Testament, and it just really makes you want. I mean, it's great. It's quite wild. Right?
But this is the same God of the New Testament, isn't it?
It is.
Did God become more moral in the New Testament, you think? Or?
I think he is always the same God, and he sees it in the right way, because we see, again, one act. He sees three acts.
So he knows more, so we need to trust, even if he says genocide or slavery or multiple wives, he knows more than we do, and so we need to just follow orders, kind of.
Right.
Okay.
I really believe independent of what I think or anybody thinks, he exists. And I think the most important thing is to find him and obey him.
Immoral maybe not be the right word. Some slaves were treated very well and were better off where they were. A lot of them that were free chose to stay when they had the option because they were better off as slaves.
I don't feel like the Bible is, like everything in there is everything we got.
Right, so it might have been prophecies that weren't recorded.
Right.
And that might have been what was done on slavery.
Perhaps.
But now you leave yourself open to maybe that was done on homosexuality.
Well, the thing is, the reason why I don't believe
like the sodomy laws, that's you would lock people up in jail for practicing that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like a legal thing.
We know it's been illegal for many, many years. Why is it all of a sudden accepted? It's still wrong. I mean.
But slavery was accepted for many, many years, and.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I don't know. You can't compare slavery and homosexuality. To me, that's immoral. It was like I said a while ago. Slavery, I wouldn't classify as immoral. That doesn't mean it's right, but immoral to me is.
So you'd say that homosexuality is worse than slavery?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, I do. Mm-hmm.
And why is that?
Well, number one, the Bible strictly prohibits it, where it doesn't strictly prohibit slavery. There you go.
This is just, it's just torn my family apart. You know, it's not, my mother has made it out that it's my fault, that the devil has taken hold on my life and that I'm the one that tore the family apart. And I have brothers and a sister that still are at home, and she's blamed that on me. So I missed a lot of that in their growing up and their life just because of who I am and who I love.
No, so when you say has torn your family apart, do you get to actually see your parents?
No, I do not have any interaction with them. As a matter of fact, if she sees me in the grocery store, which she does because she does live in Germantown, that she, goes the other direction. So that's my sister, the last time that I saw her in the grocery store, I believe she was about 12 at the time. She literally ran from me back to my mother.
It's a spirit. It's tricking them, and they allow themselves to get open that because they didn't accept Jesus. If you accept Jesus, you're not given to any spirit or principality. You're not given to them. You're protected. And you really think that Jesus is going to let his children, the ones that are his elect and are saved, do abominations to the Father? That don't happen.
So would you support going back to some of those laws that were biblically based, like anti-sodomy laws and things like that?
Sure, I think that things like that, are definitely are good, and I think we should support laws that prohibit these bad things, and So absolutely, you know, in Raleigh, I'm one of the co-sponsors of the Defense of Marriage Act, which states that we will only recognize one man, one woman.
I honestly cannot figure out why it's such a big deal. I can't figure out this whole thing about if you have gay marriage, it'll hurt marriage.
Right.
Well, it doesn't hurt marriage unless you want it to.
There's a lot of faggots out there that are pushing their stuff on people, and I will not tolerate that stuff.
It's absolutely forbidden in Islam. There's no compromise on this point. So homosexuality, if someone is practicing this in their home, that's their business. But the Islamic government does not have the right to legislate saying that this is okay, something that is against the fundamental of the belief.
They're governing a land by religious texts, and according to the Constitution, it's illegal. I don't care what they think. I don't care what they believe, who they believe in, or whether they believe they're doing a good thing. Jesus Christ was not a God of force. He was not a person of violence. So their opinions is just their opinion. But when their opinion starts getting into my personal life, that's when things need to change. Because it's not up for, you know, the moral majority to put on a ballot and vote whether I can have someone that I can love under the law and have that equal protection.
If the ACLU or Americans United for Separation brings a lawsuit and they win that case, number one, they will collect attorney's fees, which will come from the good taxpayers of the city of King. And these are very significant amounts. When there was a suit filed against the city of Los Angeles over a cross in the city seal, the attorney's fees that were part of a stipulation in a case that didn't even go to trial were close to $1 million.
And in the Mayflower Compact, they said they came to the shores of this world to advance the Christian faith. Let's get that again. They came to the shores of this country to advance the Christian faith.
17th century, 18th century, I mean, Massachusetts, they're killing Quakers in Massachusetts. But let's talk about 18th century Virginia, which is really the crux of how things develop. Before the Revolution, you have an Anglican church. You pay taxes for the Anglican minister. You will be married in the Anglican church. If you're not married in the Anglican church, if your Baptist minister marries you, your children are bastards, technically, which means they can't take in probate court. They can't testify in court. You will go to Anglican church twice a month. And then things got worse. That was the good stuff. Then things got worse. They started to harass Baptist preachers and Presbyterian preachers. They would beat them. Sometimes people would gather in an open field for a meeting, and especially Baptist meetings. People on horseback would ride through the meetings whipping people. Starting in 1768, they start throwing Baptist and Presbyterian ministers who don't have a license, and it's very hard to get a license, they start throwing them in jail. And some of the Baptists refuse to get licensed. They say, look, we report to King Jesus. That's the one who told us to be a minister. I got a calling. The Spirit moved me. I don't go to the government to get a license to preach. They'd throw them in jail. By the time of the American Revolution, there were over 50 Baptist ministers who had been jailed in Virginia for preaching. That's over half of the Baptist ministers in Virginia.
Now, we've got some folks now that don't know there's a difference between what's Caesar's and what's God's. Some theocrats or would-be theocrats who, you know, they kind of like the idea of a theocracy because they think they might get to be Theo in that theocracy. And they really are leaning in the direction of God governing. Oh, watch them.
You'd have a Baptist minister preaching in a field or in a meeting house. They would go and grab them, drag them out to the closest body of water, pond, lake, river, and dunk them. And they'd refer to it as dunking them. And they say, well, you Baptists seem to like this dunking people, so we'll dunk you. And there's one case, it's recorded, where they took this minister out and they held him underwater till he almost drowned, and they'd pull him up, and when he'd pull him up, he'd be gasping for breath, and they'd say, do you believe? Do you believe? And then they'd dunk him back under the water. And finally they pull him up and say, do you believe? And he said, I believe you mean to kill me.
Truett said that key passage in Matthew 22, 15 through 22, that says, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's, was foreshadowing the separation of church and state in the United States of America, and it's all the scripture he needed.
The largest tax being paid in 18th century Virginia is the tax to pay the Anglican minister and to keep the Anglican glebe, which is, not only did you pay the minister, you bought him a house, you bought him a farm.
If they just want to collect taxes from the liberals, they'd all starve to death. It's time for them to listen to the people. We want to honor our veterans, and we want the Christian flag.
And basically they say to the Anglican leaders, Edmund Pendleton, Robert Nicholas Carter, I mean, people who are leading the revolution, Carey, Richard Henry Lee, they say, if you want us to fight in the American Revolution, you will give us religious freedom.
Washington was on his knees, and Lee was on his knees. Hancock and a lot of our great forefathers, they were on their knees addressing the Lord Jesus Christ and asking his blessings to come and direct this nation in its earliest formation, because they believed that the difference between victory and defeat was our dependence upon a living Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ.
You start looking at Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina. In these states, the Baptists and the Presbyterians oftentimes were loyalists. They supported the British. Now that may seem odd, and again, maybe people aren't quite so proud of that history, but the reason for that was because they had local governments which discriminated in favor of the Anglican Church. They had an Anglican establishment in all of these states. And so the Presbyterians and the Baptists looked at their own government, the new government, the revolutionaries, the patriots. These are the same Anglicans who had been persecuting you. And they supported the king at Moores Creek Bridge in North Carolina, which was a very important battle. The Loyalists were Presbyterians and Baptists who were fighting for the king. Virginia is the one state in the South where that doesn't happen. Very hard to find Loyalist Baptists or Presbyterians in Virginia. They're all over North Carolina, South Carolina, and Maryland. You don't find them in Virginia. Well, why? Well, the reason is because they're working with the government. And the government has decided, rather than fighting these people, we're going to co-opt these people and say we're going to have a different country. We're going to have a country which is inclusive. If you look at the records, it goes so far as they were looking out to the western parts of Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley, this area, the Piedmont, which were particularly Presbyterian, very heavy Presbyterian population in the valley. Those are the people with rifles, okay? We have muskets in the Tidewater, Morgan's riflemen who are critical in Saratoga and Cowpens and some of these battles. They're Presbyterians. And so you actually have in some of the legislative debates in Virginia people saying, we've got to get those Western riflemen on our side. Well, they're Presbyterians. How do you get the Presbyterians on your side when you've been discriminating against them, imposing taxes upon them, throwing their people in jail? Well, you better stop. You better have religious freedom.
I taught U.S. history, I taught economics and legal and political systems, and I even taught some world history. So I could go on, but I tried to keep my answer as brief as possible.
You can go on and on.
But that's the short of it. Is I think they actually have the misunderstanding of what was intended by the founding fathers. We could go on and cite tons of examples of where they displayed.
Please do.
Things in their founding days of the United States where they, for example, the dollar bill. It says "In God we trust," and there's many other things that we could say.
When was that put on the dollar bill?
You picked my one weakness in history. I'm not the best with dates and remembering that.
E pluribus unum was the national motto. In God we trust, the language in the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God. This is all put in the 1950s as part of the anti-communist scare. This is McCarthyism.
And he said that it was, I think, in the 1950s that the...
Right, and it probably was, it doesn't date back to George Washington and things, but even the founding fathers, there's all kinds of records and things of them praying and making, acknowledgments of their Lord and Savior. And so I think that the people that are opposed to this, I think they have the misinterpreted view.
By the end of the war, we have an end to the Anglican establishment, an end to Anglican taxes, and by 1786 we get the Virginia Statute for establishing religious freedom. So we really owe religious freedom, the way we understand it, to these dissenters who are willing to stand up and say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. We're not going to allow you to throw our ministers in jail. We're not going to allow you to beat our congregants. We're not going to pay taxes to support a church. So, you know, some of that's an interesting story, and I think people can really latch on to that. And frankly, Baptists and Presbyterians ought to be proud of the role they played in developing religious freedom. But then you get to an interesting question. When they bargained for religious freedom, what was the religious freedom they thought they were bargaining for? What did they think they were getting? And what I did is I read their petitions. They wrote hundreds of petitions to the Virginia General Assembly back and forth over the course of 15, 20 years, asking for, demanding religious freedom. This is where they say over and over again, we want religious freedom not just for us, but we want it for the Jews, for the Muslims, for the Hindus, for the atheists, for the pagans. We want government out of religion. You have these petitions from Baptists and these are devout people. I mean, these are people you can't really question their religiosity. These are deeply faithful people saying, we don't want government involved with religion. The church has always the state has always corrupted the church. The state has always corrupted the church. So you have people like Thomas Jefferson who say, we want separation of church and state to protect the government. These people are saying, we want separation of church and state to protect the church.
He says, separation of church and state simply means that neither entity can hold the other in a bear hug. You don't want the state holding the church in a bear hug. You don't want the church holding the state in a bear hug. That's a graphic snapshot of reality. And then he goes on to say, and separation of church and state is right for the church because it gives the church some swinging room to act upon the state. It gives the church some swinging room. And the African American segment of Baptists have demonstrated in a dramatic and wonderful and redemptive and life-saving way how the church ought to be engaged in the political process, and the civil rights movement that we've known in this country would not have happened without the African American Baptist community.
I didn't pay enough attention in history class growing up. Now I wish I had, but my best understanding of it is that, you know, we have freedom of religion. It's not freedom from religion.
We have Baptists. Can you believe it? We have Baptists who wear the name Baptist and think they deserve to and don't. Because if there is a key insight that has bound Baptists in this country and in Europe and in South America and in Asia and other parts of the world together, it's this understanding of church-state separation. On the right, you have those who want to do away with or ignore church-state separation. Falwell and Robertson said it's a myth. It's not a reality. W.A. Criswell said it's a figment of the imagination of some infidel.
When our president, some months ago, our beloved president, made the statement that this was no longer a Christian nation, I looked at that TV and I said, "You're a liar." I was highly offended at that. This is a Christian nation. We were founded.
110%. Knowing the God that I know, 110%.
So you absolutely are certain you know Jesus rose from the dead?
Beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Sure of God?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd say 100%.
I'm 100% sure that Jesus is our Lord.
I fully believe in God, 100%, and I am definitely going to heaven.
I am definitely 100% sure.
I believe that God exists 100%.
I would say 100%.
100% sure.
Oh yeah, I'm 100% sure.
I'm 100% sure. Mine, 100, without a doubt.
Oh, I'm pretty 100% sure.
Oh, I'm 100% sure.
100%. I'm 100% sure of my faith.
I am 100% sure.
100% sure.
100%. I'm 100% sure. I do 110%.
I'm 100% certain. I'm 200% certain.
$1,000,000%.
So it's hard for me to say how certain I am of God's existence. So maybe if I were going to give it a number, I would say I'm 60% sure of God's existence.
Not sure. Not real sure.
Not 100%.
No, not 100%. Not as sure as he is.
I'm 100%, but I still have doubts.
I said 99.9 because you always sometimes say, wow, what if I am wrong?
I don't have to be completely certain. That's why they call it faith instead of knowledge.
It would be hard for me to understand why evil exists if God is manipulating things. That would not be a God that I could believe in. How do I explain the Holocaust?
He showed himself to me. He appeared in my living room. I mean, as you were standing there in the flesh, he was standing there in the spirit. And I could see him physically and just clear as day as I'm seeing you now.
So you're an eyewitness, so it's...
Yes, I see him with my very two eyes. There's other things I've seen too that I can't say.
If Jesus really showed up at the door right now and told me he was Jesus, I'd probably go check myself in somewhere. I'm not sure I'd believe him still.
God hasn't appeared to me. I haven't seen a burning bush or the living, the living youthful form of Krishna.
I'm not sure 100% about much of anything because I want to be a critical thinker. That's not demonic. That's not of the satanic variety. That's just using your brain to look at new data and to be willing to reassess how you live your life.
If there is a heaven as it has been portrayed, and I say if, that is the area which I'm most likely to have doubts. I've been dead a couple of times. Well, once literally, no vital signs. I was technically, biologically dead right over there in Reynolda Hall when my ascending aorta ruptured and my chest, my whole body was filled with blood. And they couldn't find a pulse, they couldn't find a heartbeat, there wasn't one. And happily, one of the former administrators of this institution trained all the maintenance people in emergency first aid. I've had my doubts about heaven and what we know. I didn't have any bells or light at the end of a long tunnel or meet any of my deceased kinfolks or hear any heavenly choirs during that 8 days of drug-induced coma. And I don't, there's some things I don't know, and I don't think God expects us to know. The divine expects us to know. The providence, the wisdom behind the universe expects us to know. Or we'd have had someone come back to tell us how it was over there. And so I'm willing to do the best I can on the basis of what I know. And I don't just mean know with my head, I mean what I know experientially, what I've learned with people. And I think that's all that is expected of anyone.
He put doubt in her mind, and that's how he still does with us today. Because she told him, we can't eat of that because God said we would die if we eat of this fruit. And he says, did God really say that? And he puts that doubt in. Well, what did he really say? And that's how he does with us today. If he can put that doubt in your mind, then he's got you.
When I was growing up, I lost my father when I was 7 months old. He was on his way to work and went around a curve and hit a woman and 2 children head on. And he died instantly. The woman was his aunt. And they all survived. She was pregnant at the time and lost her child. But she survived, and her son and daughter survived. And then several years later, my mother married my stepfather, who raised me. He's the only dad I knew, and raised me as his own, really. And he taught me all the things that a dad teaches a son, from playing ball to how to fish. But in 4th grade, I remember he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and that was malignant. And the doctors told him all they can do is do things to extend his life. They couldn't save it. And so we had several good years, about 4 years, surgeries and radiation treatments, extended his life. He got to see my brother get into school really good, and I think first grade. And I remember during that time, I had already become a Christian, and I had wondered, why would God take my father and then again take the only father I knew? And there was doubts and questions there. But then when my dad died, and we all stood around him as he passed away, and it was so peaceful. He'd been in so much pain, and he was so peaceful. It was so peaceful just watching him pass away. You could feel the peace come over you as well. And that's when I knew that the moments I'd felt God had left me, He hadn't. He had been there the whole time. And He was there with me then.
People pretty much make the God, you know. So it's a necessary thing. A lot of people need that.
Do you think Jesus rose from the dead literally, or can we?
Like a zombie? That's great, awesome. It's funny, yeah. There's a lot of humor in it. If you take things so heavy, you're anchoring yourself. But just like I said, think of a zombie as Jesus as zombie. Wow, you know, it just sort of blows up the myths and preconceptions, and then maybe there's room for truth. It's metaphor, rising from the dead. That's very true, but it's true for all of us, not just for Jesus.
I'm a mambo. It's M-A-M-B-O.
What does that mean exactly?
It's a voodoo priestess. And so I was trained by Edgar Jean Lewis of Haiti and Sally Ann Glassman of New Orleans. I did tarot reading at the Greensboro Country Club for 3 hours right before I went to the Blind Tiger and did the same show. So that was interesting. No one there had ever had a tarot card reading before. And they were like fortune telling. And so then when I was sitting there doing 10 and 15 minute readings, they were like, well, this is real. I was like, yeah, this is real.
Individual citizens of King, in their turn, can put in to honor a veteran, a family member, and they will have a week. And during that week, they may, by their decision, display a flag that honors that veteran. It must be a flag that is recognized currently by the Department of Veterans Affairs. It cannot be a symbol that they want to make up. They cannot, come and bring some obscene message or something like that. It's got to be something recognized by the Department of Veteran Affairs as approved for tombstones in military cemeteries. That's the standard. And so what will have to be done is there'll have to be some sort of truly independent, neutral lottery system that allows random selection.
They should have waited. The flag should have stood until they see what the ACLU, if they did file a lawsuit, and CLA was willing to come in and represent them, and they should have kept the flag up.
I can think of a case in Winston-Salem when a school teacher, an 8th grade school teacher, was raped by her students. I think she might have preferred that those students had read the 10 Commandments and thought there was a God Almighty somewhere that's going to judge them.
Lyman Beecher, for example, is a famous minister in the 19th century, big name minister. He's the president of Yale, which is a church school at that time. They go to Connecticut to disestablish. The Republicans take over Connecticut, Jeffersonians, and they're going to disestablish religion. And he's saying exactly what you're saying. We can't have a moral government. The country will fall apart. People will be, I mean, some of the things they say are crazy. Our daughters will be prostitutes. The Bible's going to be burned. Well, after it's done, about 10 years later, Lyman Beecher comes out and admits, he says, I was wrong. He said, this is the best thing that's ever happened to religion, because now people have to actually decide to be religious, as opposed to, well, the government's telling you, you got to go to church or you got to be Christian. And so the evangelicals, my original book's about the 18th century evangelicals. The 19th century evangelicals get it. It's the 20th century evangelicals.
Whether we would want the government to go that one big step further and turn around and start promoting the Christian religion, I would have to think a lot about that. I don't know if I'd really want my government doing that or not. I don't have an answer. I'd have to think about it.
He, by executive order, put over the period of his 8 years in the presidency nearly $5 billion into the faith-based initiatives, so-called, without legislative approval, just by executive order from the presidency. Well, now, what's wrong with faith-based initiatives? That makes good sense. Let these churches, after all, they do a better job than the government agencies. No. Serious studies in the University of Indiana and the University of Pennsylvania demonstrated that they do not do a better job than government agencies.
Quite properly, religion is excluded from the provisions of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act that ban religious discrimination. So that they can discriminate on the basis of religion in hiring. They can maintain their autonomy and their essential nature. A Baptist church doesn't have to hire a Buddhist as a preacher. They can hire a Baptist. Secular companies can't do that, but that's a proper accommodation of religion to be able to hire its own kind when it's using its own money.
I think Barack Obama knows that the faith-based initiative is at its core unconstitutional, that the idea that you can give tax dollars to a group and then say to the group, you can hire on the basis of religion, discriminate against anybody that's not like you. He cannot believe that that's true, but that's a policy as we're speaking today.
Back in the 18th century, the Anglican Church was not only the established church in Virginia, but they were responsible for poor relief. They took care of orphans, they took care of, there was a poor widow in the community, and there were allegations at that time from the Baptists and the Presbyterians that they're discriminating against Baptist orphans. They're discriminating against Presbyterian orphans.
We think that the proper form of government is actually to have an enlightened king. And the king is responsible for every citizen in the state to see that he's properly engaged in his duties according to his abilities, and that everyone is taken care of, and he behaves like the father. And that's what we consider to be the best form of government.
So you consider that better than democracy?
Better than democracy.
Mm-hmm. If somebody were to become a God-conscious king, the first thing they should do is close all the slaughterhouses. Very bad karma. Very bad karma.
We believe that the innocent animals are also our countrymen. They are citizens of this country, and that they deserve protection as much as the human creatures.
If I said I don't believe in force, it's not that I don't believe in force, but where it's necessary, and that's according to Scripture.
He said, for example, that the Constitution of the United States needs to be changed so that it fits into God's law, not the other way around. In other words, we don't change the laws of God if we're living in America. Well, it's honest, it's horrifying, it's theocratic, but at least he's telling the truth.
He's my Savior. You follow him blindly. Absolutely without question. Always.
He asked Abraham to take his son up to the top of the mountain to slay him in obedience to God. Just to be obedient.
And do you think that Abraham was doing the right thing?
Well, being obedient to God, absolutely. If God tells you, because you're talking about the God that can take your very breath away, you do what you're told.
On 3 different occasions that
Satan, the Shaitan, approached Abraham trying to tell him, hey man, that's your son, what are you doing? And that he took stones and tossed them at him. So part of the pilgrimage is this reenactment of Abraham tossing stones at the devil because he was trying to stop him from doing it.
So when Joshua was ordered to kill men and women and children, in that time, in that context, he was doing the right thing because he was following God's orders.
He was following God's orders, yes.
If you were in Joshua's place or in Abraham's place, and you knew this was God, and he ordered you to kill all the men, women, and children of the Canaanites, or to kill your own child, would you follow that order?
You know, I hope I'd have enough faith to know to follow that.
You would, yeah.
And that's a serious thing. That's when you're really putting your faith on the line.
For me, I take the Bible for what it says. If God ordered it, then it was good, and I think that's what Joshua was supposed to do.
So if you're at the direct command of God, then that's the end of the story.
If you were back in Joshua's time, and God gave you that order, would you follow it?
I would hope so. I would. I would like to think that I would be strong enough to do that. I would be afraid not to, because, and it is hard. Sometimes God asks us to do nothing like that, thank goodness. But sometimes in our own lives, He asks us to make hard decisions. And we have to, at the end of the day, you have to say, am I going to please man, or am I going to please God?
One of my favorite quotes ever is from Simone de Beauvoir in The Ethics of Ambiguity. And she says that being ambiguous is a wonderful thing, that people who don't know, who are ambiguous, are not going to kill you because you believe differently than they do. It's the people who know absolutely that they're right, who hurt each other.
Now, for me, it would be difficult. Just like it was difficult for Arjuna. It would be difficult for me to go and kill all of my friends and my family members and my grandfather and my teachers, who are, respectable people, who are, good people. That would be really hard. It's a question of being actually surrendered.
Well, I have to make sure that I really know that it's God. Right. And I have to make sure that I really am pure enough to see it.
How would you know if it was really God?
Oh, you'd know. I mean, I hope I would know.
So you would know. Okay. So what if you did know then?
If Krishna comes up to me and says, it's my desire for you to kill this person,
I would just call it my shortcomings. My father always said that he would, and I was appalled for the fact that thinking that my father would, okay, if God asks me to kill you, I'm going to. Okay, that's fine. I'll just have to deal with God on that later. No, I couldn't do it.
Yes, if I had seen God's face and knew it was Him, yes, I would follow His order. I would do whatever God told me to do.
People need to stand up to this God and say no more. I would kick that God in the balls for such a thing. I really would. I'm so tired of this barbarism being accepted as some sort of great thing when it's the opposite.
I'd say, forgive me. It's just another time I screwed up and didn't listen to you, And we're just gonna have to let my son live, so I wouldn't do it, man.
He would have to come, and he would have to play his flute, and he would have to be there in blue complexion, yellow garments, flower garland, shark-shaped earrings. I need the whole works. If you're gonna ask me to do something that's awful, I need some serious proof.
I think it's just what other people wrote afterwards in order to justify horrific things they do so that they would have a land,
My opinion, and this is something that I told Tracy, do what we can humanitarianly, send them back. They come back, break their ankles. They may not want to come back.
If some of these people that running around here with all the hate they're spewing, do you really think God would have been hanging out with them? Would they be people that Jesus would come and hang out with? Would He come and have dinner with them and chit-chat? I don't believe He would.
And I'm not excusing it or saying it's right, but we got people flying passenger planes into buildings. We got to do something. I wouldn't want that position.
What do you think Jesus would say about torturing people?
Yeah, he probably wouldn't like it. I don't know. I mean, you know, he said love your enemies as well as your brother, so that's hard to do. That's a hard thing to do. I mean, honestly, I don't think he'd like it so good.
That's why we have tried to arm you with the most powerful weapon you have, information you need. Find all of this out, find it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Know it, and tell everyone you know.
He had a person on there by the name of Dave Barton.
David Barton's website, you can go there, and he has one of the largest groups of documents of our founding fathers that exist.
Well, first of all, he's a sloppy historian, if he should be considered an historian at all, and he does literally make things up as well. Sometimes he claims that he has evidence, and of course the evidence turns out not to exist.
He's the quintessential opportunist who sees a way to tap this ignorance and fear that people have. In both of the agencies that I've directed over the last half century, the Texas Christian Life Commission and the Baptist Joint Committee on Public Affairs, we had interns and graduate students who did the research on the Barton materials and put out sort of white papers on where Barton is wrong and where he is using quotes dishonestly and making up quotes that no one else in American history has found.
I've never met David Barton, but these people have been told these are wrong, and yet they continue to perpetuate them. And you know, that's really, a lot of conservatives complain about revisionist history. This is revisionist history.
It's insanity that we want to rewrite history. How many are sick and tired of the school children being taught lies about our heritage? How many are sick and tired of them trying to distort what Thomas Jefferson really meant?
In the interviews, the state representatives and the Congress people, they all use all of the facts from David Barton. They've seen him on that's all they watch is Fox
He gave
News.
every member of 535 members of the United States Congress his whole set of books. One's red, one's white, one's blue. And as I'd visit on Capitol Hill while I was still up there, he did this years ago, I'd see them, and many times they would leave them out in a prominent place in the waiting room so you could see that they had Barton. And that was in itself good enough for some of their visitors who were lobbying them. Well, you see, I've read David Barton, you know.
So when you have people in the name of Christianity abusing the truth, I mean, it seems to me that's a terribly un-Christian thing to do.
What I want to ask that historian is, what are his sources?
Well, I mean, he's at Monticello, so he says the sources are right there.
Remember what I told you. Listen, our country is so embedded with those folks that are the 1960s hippies that have been calling, you know, the soldiers the baby killers. They're the same folks that are in the White House right now.
Yeah, I do believe in the rapture, and I do believe I'm going.
I believe we are in the last days. This is the final dispensation.
We're in the last times. The last times are not coming. We are in the last times. I mean, it's already started.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm a big-time end times prophecy student.
The news the other night, May 21st, 2010, I believe, is the date that they've set for God coming back now.
May 21st is the current date.
May 21st.
In my heart of hearts, in my truth, I believe that tomorrow is the last day.
This teaches you about God and the rapture, when it's going to go down. It's going to be a global earthquake.
When God comes, the people who are saved, they're going to go to heaven. The people who aren't raptured, they're going to stay here and suffer the 5 months of judgment.
Well, when we were listening to the open forum, he was saying that it's going to happen like at 6 p.m. on Saturday, or a half an hour later, or a half an hour earlier, or a couple minutes or something like that. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be a huge earthquake that's going to top all the earthquake. It's going to top Japan's and everything. And as the minute that the earthquake hits, the people are going to get raptured, and then the graves are going to come up and they're going to be open. But it's not like they're going to be zombies or anything.
It says you'll be changed in the twinkling of an eye, and you'll be caught up to meet him in the air. So if that's what it says, that's what's going to come.
Stop telling people these damn lies. All right. Oh, man.
So do you think this will happen during your lifetime?
Yeah, I do. I really do.
Life's easy that way. If you don't know the date, your life goes on, no interruptions. You can make your plans for next week, next month, next year. But once you find from Scripture that God has given you a date, your whole life changes overnight. That's your focus 24/7. You can't get your mind off of that. That's all you think about.
And there's a verse in the Quran that talks about how we'll be recreated down to our fingernails.
One of the big things to watch for is the building of the third temple. There is a Temple Mount group over there now that are making plans to build that, to make it a reality. That's going to happen.
Now, isn't there a mosque there now?
There is.
So what happens to the mosque?
I don't know. I don't know how it's all going to play out exactly. But that temple will be built. That temple will be rebuilt because the Antichrist is going to set himself up in there as God.
I work for the state. I was working for the state, correction officer, and I was a part-time police officer. And so I gave up both of those jobs.
Don't forget private investigator.
Well, in between that, yes, and I had my own business as a PI, private investigator, licensed by the state of New York.
And so you quit those jobs?
Yes, I did. I gave up my business, and I resigned from both of my jobs.
I've attempted 2 suicides in the last 3 months. I'm in a lot of pain from 3 strokes and a terrible fall I took. And death will relieve my pain. So if I get called up to heaven on Saturday or May 21st, I'll be very happy to rapture and go to heaven. But when I've been doing cons, and I grew up across the street from a racetrack. I grew up with a lot of con artists. The guy that's the head of Family Radio, they're handing out tracts. The tracts tell people, the advertisements tell people, listen to Family Radio, and then they ask for donations. This is about dinero, money, nothing else. And you can believe the earth will still be here May 22nd.
I've given some money, yes, I have. I'm not going to need it anyway.
And I said, well, that's pretty clear, all right, but my lawyer has said I definitely should not say on television that Pat Robertson is a crook. So I will not say Pat Robertson is a crook.
So all of our increase, we give 10% of that. And again, that is a faith thing. Yes, we give it to the church. And that is something that is probably, it's a great sign of faith.
It's an invisible product they're selling. And when you're selling an invisible product, you make it up however you need to. And I say we stop that by requiring credible evidence to substantiate those claims.
And he says there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and he's going to put it all together again.
A new heaven and new earth is just what the doctor would order.
And would it shake your faith if nothing happened tomorrow?
It's going to happen tomorrow.
We don't entertain such a thought. To entertain such a thought means you don't believe. You're in the same boat as everyone else who's waiting for it to pass, or maybe it's a possibility. That kind of faith is not the faith that comes from God.
The latest number we've heard is 70 applications, and we only needed 52 for the year. And according to the King City officials, they've all been for Christian flags so far, which is, kind of what we all wanted, but the option is there for anybody else. But at this point, that's what we're hearing. So
she is an atheist and is a veteran, but she can't because she's afraid of what would happen. I mean, she's trying to go to school to become a teacher. She's trying, her husband has a business, her dad has a business, but she's afraid of what would happen if, her name got out.
Many of them were told that if they didn't fly a Christian flag, that they would be boycotted by Calvary Baptist and other people in the community. So it was the fear tactic.
If they don't believe in the Christian values that I have, I need to know about it, because I probably will take my business elsewhere, and I will encourage other Christians. And if they don't care about Christians, I mean, they claim there's not many of us, so what would they be worried about, you know? Except for the 3 atheists that'll probably be coming to do their business there.
Our nation was founded on Christianity as a base of it. In my opinion, the lawyers, the judges, the senators that make our stupid laws, they don't like it. Get the hell out of our nation. Let's get the right people in.
If they put the Muslim flag up, I cannot definitely see a problem. And
Yeah.
because under that flag there was United States soldiers killed, and I do have a problem with their religious beliefs, but due to the fact that they attack me because they feel that I am an infidel, so therefore I should be destroyed.
Many other families who may not have been Christian, may have been Jewish, may have been many other religions, they fought and died for this country as well.
He served well, and I think as far as right now he's still in, but
And if he lived in King, you would feel that he would have the right to fly the Muslim flag here? Or?
See, that's maybe that's where I do have mixed emotions. If he lived in King and he wanted to fly it, I'd probably still feel bad. You got to understand that there's a lot of emotions mixed with. Actually, to be honest, I did think about that, and let me just answer the best way I can. I'd probably have to deal with it and accept it. I understand the religion and understand that all Muslims aren't against Westernization, aren't against me or against my religion, or don't feel that way. So it probably hurt a little bit, but at the same time, I have to feel that would be fair.
I don't endorse or support allowing, a flag of the Muslim flag or Islamic symbols to be, flying there in our Veterans Memorial. There's a Veterans Memorial. We were not fighting, to protect the Muslim faith. Those people were fighting to protect the United States and the heritage and tradition that we were founded on, which is Christianity. And I think that, I hope that doesn't happen, but we'll just have to, I guess, wait and see what does happen.
It does seem like that's the danger of the open forum. Somebody could put up the atheist flag or whatever.
Yeah, that would be sad, very sad. And I'd hate to see that memorial desecrated that way.
And it does seem like a lot of the people that I've interviewed really just don't feel that they would stand for that. That they would be problems, trouble.
I think that we would be asking for serious trouble, and I just hope it doesn't come to that. And if that's in fact the route that the City Council is truly going to allow us to go down that road, I hope that they'll maybe rethink some of that. I'm not sure that's the pathway that we need to go.
You set up a system that in theory allows for a flag to be drawn at some point that will not be a Christian flag. It's it's not as impossible as winning the Powerball lottery, but it's certainly difficult. But then you're upset when someone takes advantage of a neutral possibility and tries to prevail, not in a court, not in an election, just in a drawing, and you're even upset about that. I'd have serious doubts whether that elected official is confident enough in his faith that it will withstand the critique, the comment, the very existence of some other faith. One of the things that's good about thinking, about critical thinking, you have to agree you could be wrong at least some of the time, maybe just occasionally, maybe very rarely, but you have to be willing to have a dialogue. If you're not, frankly, you're a coward. You're a coward. And a lot of officials in North Carolina are in that category. And if they don't like the term, then they better change their behavior.
Do I believe there should be a separation of church and state? Absolutely not. Because without the Christian values behind our government will end up being a tyranny. And tyranny means it's people that decide whether or not you should have rights. People that decide how they want to apply those rights in any particular case. You see, our founding fathers realized there were certain rights called inalienable rights. Inalienable rights means God-given. You separate God from those rights, well, what rights do you have then? Only the rights that someone else says that you should have or can have, and we'll apply them to you as we choose.
If you think about it, how do most governments at the time, 1787, well, it's God through the king, the divine right of kings. God gives Louis, gives George III, gives, the king, Catherine the Great, we go down the list, gives them authority, and then they're kind enough to give some to the nobles and to the priests and to the people. Well, we say, we the people create this nation. Power is coming from the people up.
If there were a think tank, if you will, or a group of people who came together and decided, all right, what is the absolute truth? We're gonna study the scriptures in a broad-minded way. We're gonna be very inclusive, and we're gonna try to get to the bottom of what's the absolute truth.
There is one God, the creator of the universe. He made everything.
Krishna's body is completely made out of spiritual energy.
One energy split into its polar, male, female.
There's one God. He has unlimited names.
Allah, the one God.
For every universe, there's a Lord Brahma.
Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden.
The extraterrestrials came down and bred and pretty much created experiments with the humanoid beings that were already here.
Not only this world, but many worlds.
I don't believe that there's a beginning and an end.
The fall of Satan, he was an angel. He was the most beautiful creature that God created.
There was a war in heaven.
He lives for many yuga cycles. It's thousands and like 1,400,000,000 years or something like that.
The dragon, with his tail taking a third of the stars of heaven.
And do things for their other planets. They put us in slavery, basically. That's another story that maybe not a lot of people know about.
And then Moses and
the chant is Hare Krishna.
Lehi's son named Nephi built a ship.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Transmigration and reincarnation.
They sailed to the Americas.
God required sacrifice, a blood sacrifice to cover sin.
The demigods are demi-gods.
Hare Hare, Hare Ram.
And then that's where Jesus comes along.
He got on one of those caravans and he went to India, went to Jagannath Puri, and he went up to Tibet.
An appearance of Jesus Christ on the American continent after his resurrection.
And this child all of a sudden rose up from the dead and started to speak. And he started to speak this incredible philosophy in Krishna consciousness.
Rise from the dead? I don't know if I...
We don't believe that Jesus was crucified, so that precludes any, in our belief system, having a resurrection.
It says, who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist.
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Mormon was one of the final prophets. He was entrusted with all these metal plates.
The last prophet, Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, who was born 570 years after Jesus Christ.
But we know eventually he deposited these plates in a place called the Hill Cumorah.
Islam is based on this revelation, 23 revelation, that was given to Muhammad, the prophet, that is called the Quran.
Krishna appears as a blue-complexioned youth, and he's a cowherd boy.
So anyway, he gets these plates, but he's also commanded not to show them to anybody. Except for 3 witnesses and who had a special experience to see the plates, and also 8 other witnesses that were able to hold them and see them. And all those are in the front of the book. They give their testimony that they had seen them.
And have you seen them yourself?
The plates?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
I have not seen them.
I would think they would display them like the Constitution or something.
Right. Well, my belief is that God wants us to work by faith and not by sight.
Oh.
And so they were never given to the common person to see.
Because that would be too much proof?
Too much proof.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Okay. Two of the witnesses actually did not remain faithful to the church, but they always remained faithful to their testimony that they in fact saw them.
So they saw the proof, but then they changed their mind about believing in it?
Well, it's a challenging thing.
how do you know that this is the right book, the Quran, rather than, say, the Bhagavad Gita for the Hindus, or
Right.
the Bible, or the Book of Mormon,
Right.
or any of the other groups?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the truth or perception of truth speaks to our hearts before it speaks to our head.
When I saw the movie Avatar, for example, some of the animals that were featured in that movie and the way the Avatar, the actual beings were, the Na'vi, I saw things like that in my head in meditation before I ever saw that movie.
I think that our minds are very powerful at creating what we want to see.
If you can believe it first, then you'll start to see it. And the more you believe, the more you'll start to see. There are a lot of people that would never see an angel, would never see Jesus, or never see a miracle because down inside they really don't believe it.
The devil sounds real good. He sounds good. You know, why don't you rely on your intelligence?
I think faith fills that void when you don't have the answer.
To assume that anyone comes to their faith decisions, or their major faith decisions about life, identification with a religious commitment, from a tabula rasa, and sits down and looks at the options and makes a rational decision, is just foolishness, because that's not the way human beings work.
So if you had been raised in India with Hindus, you might
I probably would very well be likely to be a Hindu.
And faith to me is believing in something that I cannot prove to you.
It said, he's risen, we've seen him. He says, I won't believe it till I see him myself. And when he did see him, he was like, oh, Lord, my God and my Savior. And Jesus said, well, blessed are you, but even more so will be those who are blessed, who have not seen and still believe.
If you are truly, truly trusting in this, you must be willing to put it to the test.
Now, you look like you're a little cold.
Just a little chilly.
Why is that?
Because we have no power here in our camper.
And why is that?
The city came up yesterday morning on Monday and turned the power off, which affected the whole memorial, so that now the memorial sits in the dark at night. And there is no power here for us to use for the heat for the camper.
Now, why do you think they would do that?
Probably to try to get rid of us. We've been here, this is our 76th day here at the memorial. So
They're trying to literally freeze you out.
Yeah. It might work.
As you can see right now, it's dark again. Apparently they're not willing to enforce federal law. The American flag is up on that pole without any lighting to it, and we're trying to tell them to file the complaint, and they don't want to do it. So we've already told them that if they don't turn the lighting on, we're going to be cutting that pole, the flag off that pole.
They did it. There's no doubt in my mind they did.
You got to settle down, dude. They are going to throw you out of here, and you will not be allowed to come back.
They can't ban me from this
Yes,
park.
they can. They can ban anybody they want to from this park.
I'm a veteran of 12 years in the Army, life member of the American Legion, life member of the VFW. Because now they're turning on the citizens of King. They're not representing the city of King.
How does it feel to win one battle?
Yeah, well, we got one victory here. We got the lights back on.
Even though I'm out here, I can't feel my feet, can't feel my hands, I'm still out here praising God. This is exactly what it's all about. We're in the trenches trying to fight the good fight.
There would be a huge siren sounding, and everybody knew what that meant. You just took your child and you ran to the bomb shelter, basically. That's how it is. And like these huge booms would rattle the entire land for a while, and after a few days it would be done. And so that was mainly my experience. The other...
How old were you when that happened?
Through my entire life.
Lord Shiva decided that he would go and the first
animal.
Yeah, the first living being that he saw, he would take the head of that living being and put it on his son, and that was an elephant. That was Ganesh.
Do you believe literally that happened? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a myth. There's no way that could have happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, to me that's like a off-the-wall fairy tale. That's just kind of weird.
The ancient religions are now considered mythology by us, and I believe that in the future our current religions will be considered mythology in the similar or same way.
They definitely believe that story as surely as anybody would believe Jesus.
And I don't mean to make fun of people, because we've got well-respected, intelligent people, like especially in Hollywood now, that are into the Scientology, and they believe we came from aliens from outer space or something. I mean, and I'm thinking, that just okay, but they really, really believe that.
So here's what Justin Martyr said. Justin Martyr is an early church father from the 2nd century. Analogies to the history of Christ. And when we say also that the Word, who is the first birth of God, was produced without sexual union, and that he, Jesus Christ, our teacher, was crucified and died, and rose again, and ascended into heaven, we propound nothing different from what you believe regarding those whom you esteem sons of Jupiter. As to Christ's being born of a virgin, Justin says, you have your Perseus to balance that. So now we know that Perseus was claimed to have been born of a virgin.
One of the crudest and vilest forms of worship, and I hate to use this kind of language, but it's the truth. In Islam, idolatry, to make something with your own hands and invest some kind of divine into it and bow down and attribute qualities to that which only belong to the Creator is horrible.
They were killing their babies in sacrifice to their God, and they would put that baby in the wall of their home in honor of their God. God will not stand for that, and it is a stench in the nostrils of God.
I've actually had debates with people who have said, oh, I don't want to know anything about those pre-Christian cultures because they were all evil. I can't give you any evidence then at that point. You've completely closed off. There's no way I can prove a thing if you have no interest in looking at the pre-Christian culture. So, we're in a catch-22 with this one. And yeah, it becomes a matter of faith. They have no problem. There is that special pleading again. We can believe this without a stitch of evidence because it's faith. But we can't believe anything that you've said without a mountain of evidence that we will still reject.
It couldn't be much more than, 5,000, 6,000 years old, and so, things in science do not challenge, me and my faith. I believe everything the Bible says. If God said He put all those animals in the ark in a cracker box, I would believe it and believe that He would have the power to do that.
So they weren't like going back to Neanderthals or...
No. We believe Adam, in the form that we are now, that this is how we were, this is how we were created, we were just bigger. And Muhammad, the prophet, has said that, from that, the stature of humans just got smaller.
There are things that are taught in the science class that, I disagree with, I think that are wrong. Things like the Big Bang Theory, things like evolution, and a whole other host of ideas and theories of how the Earth came about. I think if they're going to teach that, they should at least teach the Christian point of view. If they're going to teach, their goal is to teach the broad spectrum, then they should teach, religious points of views as well.
There are 400,000 species of human-type beings in the universe. So it's beyond my...
That would include other planets and things like that.
Right.
Too.
And we do believe that there is life on other planets.
So if there were two people, then did their children then marry each other, or who were Adam and Eve's children procreating with?
Probably, yeah. It would just start with two and
I see, right,
and go out like that.
Right.
There's no difference between that hypothesis and the hypothesis that evolution existed. At the beginning, you have a hypothesis, but it's the process by which you collect facts. The whole creation argument is rooted in one fact, and that's that it exists in the Bible and it's written in some kind of way. And then the other way of doing it, as you said, was then to just poke holes in the limitations of the evolutionary fossil record and things like that. But but those are minor compared to the overall premise of believing in just the hypothesis.
Right.
You can't just believe in a hypothesis.
The late Dr. Jerry Falwell and I were on many television programs together. One night when we were literally in the same studio, I asked him if he had read a new story on the front pages of most newspapers about a new fossil, a so-called intermediate fossil, which of course people who believe in creationism say, well, there are gaps in the fossil record. I asked him about it because it was so prominent. He looked at me and said, Barry, you know I don't read that stuff. I'm sorry, but that is not the way a thinking person with a brain, which presumably Dr. Falwell thought he got from God in a very direct way, to ignore the truth, to not use the faculties you have to learn the truth, is an appalling statement about what kind of a person you are. And whether you're a David Barton who's getting wealthy over lying, or you're a person who refuses to look at counter evidence in the middle of North Carolina, you're doing something fundamentally wrong about what many people would call their God-given gift, to try to separate the wheat from the chaff, the truth from the lies.
I needed to drop off some applications for the limited public forum. I can't in all consciousness sit back and do nothing. You know, I mean, if something happens, it happens. But people in this country that fight for freedom, they take that chance. But you have to stand up for something.
Relation. I just want the Christian flag to fly up there. And if they need to come over here and all of a sudden atheists want to come over here and start supporting this, by all means, you know, I could easily put that symbol on a homosexual banner, you know, the gay flag thing, and they know it. The lady at the city hall, the city clerk herself, told me, well, don't go spreading that around so much.
Because you are submitting a flag in honor of your father, who's an atheist, and so you're respecting that by having a flag flown in his honor. Do you think he is going to hell?
Yes. There's no doubt in my mind. You know...
That he's going to hell?
Not that he's going to, he's there. He had tumors in his brain, and he was losing his faculties. He was losing his ability to function properly, you know, to zip, I mean, he wasn't all that old. He just, his mind started going, falling away from him. But when he saw the Catholic priest, didn't say anything. So what do I know about his faith? You know, he always lived for himself, and that's that nucleus thing, that symbol of the atheist thing, living for yourself, the atom. That's the way it is. They're all self-serving. They believe they are their own God, or maybe they believe that they don't need any other God, that they can do it themselves. It's all a self-indulgent thing. And he was. You know, he was a person who, I mean, he was a great father. And I love him more than, and I say he's my stepfather. He is my stepfather. But he's more of a father to me than my real father was. And if ever there was a role model, he would have been it. Because he was a very hard worker, fought for his family, loved my mother, and he took us in. We weren't even his real kids, you know. And when asked about whether I know if he's in heaven or hell, as far as I know, he's exactly where the Bible tells me he is. He's in hell right now. And that doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't make me put a smile on my face or anything like that. I may not even fly the flag, but this is just to challenge the policy as it is written, because it needs to be made known that this is the possibility. Right. Anyways, let's go.
But the question that we asked today is the same that Jesus asked his disciples there. Who do you say that I am?
How do you distinguish between people who used to believe in Zeus as much as people believe in Jesus now?
No, that's simple. You know, Jesus is, even non-Christian writings have a history of a Jesus that was crucified, that was a teacher.
If you look at the historical record of when this supposedly happens, you find nothing. That might be very shocking to people who have been told that Jesus Christ was the most famous person who ever lived. The New Testament itself has some 24 scriptures in which Jesus is touted as being famed wide and far. He's doing miracles that are shocking people. 500, 1 Corinthians, 500 people saw him resurrected. At his death, there were earthquakes, the sun darkens, the saints rise up out of the ground, and they wander through the streets of Jerusalem. You must sit and say to yourself, why isn't this in the historical record of the day? There were people writing at the time. It's called one of the best documented periods in history.
So I think there's over 25,000 original manuscripts of the Bible.
The Bible was not crafted by God. People don't even understand church history. They don't understand that there was a big meeting and people looked to canonize the Bible, that is, to create what books are in, what books are out. Gospel of Thomas, out. Gospel of John, in. This is a human undertaking.
The Bible being, dating back to even 25 years after the actual.
We don't have any autographs or originals of the Gospels or the epistles. We have no evidence in the literary record of the existence of the canonical Gospels as we have them before the end of the 2nd century. In other words, they're not quoted verbatim anywhere before that. They don't appear in the historical record. Nobody mentions them. We have no evidence showing that they really were written by the people in whose names they are presented. We don't even really have any evidence that those particular individuals, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, actually lived. So there really is absolutely no evidence for this entire story other than the New Testament.
It wasn't just one person that said, yeah, I saw him, there he goes, like Elvis or something like that. And there's 500 people. You just can't, other people say, oh, there was just a dream or an illusion. Man, if you and I went to bed and we both had dreams, odds are they're not going to be about the same thing.
But those 500 people, we're only hearing about them from one person who's saying there were 500 people, right?
I'm not sure. I'll tell you. I don't know.
Right.
But I believe, I believe the Bible.
To have you believe in a particular religion either most of your life, half your life, or all your life, and then to find out that there's no credible evidence to support it, that can make you pretty mad.
Do you remember when you found out that there wasn't a Santa Claus?
Santa Claus? Yeah, I remember, yeah.
What was your reaction?
It was kind of disappointing.
Oh yeah. Did you feel like your parents had lied to you, or?
I didn't worry. I don't know, I didn't worry about it too much. But I know some kids have thought.
Traumatic.
Yeah, it was a little traumatic, yeah. And one friend of mine, their son asked when he was little, he said, is Santa Claus real like Jesus is real?
Oh.
Very thoughtful question.
Yeah.
Very good question.
So the city of King, they...
To make sure my application was not rejected, I initially put in 4 applicants. My father, my 2 brothers, and myself, all of us military, actually 5, one being my in-law who was a World War II vet. I found at a later date that you could change your mind as to what flag you wanted to fly, because it's, even though it's a limited public forum, it's limited to my choice, not the city's choice. And as any forum, you have the right to change your mind and your opinions. And so I put my applications in, and then I went to the drawing where they had ping pong balls with numbers, and your application had a number assigned to that ball, and all of mine were picked, every single one of them. And that was quite interesting. And many of the people who opposed me, theirs was not. So I just really kind of wonder which side God was on that day, I guess.
So you got drawn, one of them, right?
Yeah.
What was your number that was drawn?
81.
Oh, very good.
June 6th.
Not many words were spoken after that, except that two things. My father arranged, he wanted me to get an abortion. I'm so grateful I was so far along. That was the most, I mean, I can't even begin to think of what I would have gone through had that had happened. My parents arranged for me to go to a home for unwed mothers, a Salvation Army home for unwed mothers. It was in Cleveland, and it was not, it was some ways from, maybe a half an hour drive or something from where we lived. So nobody knew. You have an option. You can bottle feed your baby one time or not at all, and then you never see your child again. There is no greater attachment in this world than a mother and child. There's no greater attachment. And to give up a child and never see the child again. I mean, I really honestly remember swallowing all my emotions. I remember swallowing all my emotions, which later on came back at me. I thought hippie life would find me happiness. Then we tried living in the country and just living out with nothing on the land. But there was always something missing. And when I started practicing Krishna consciousness, it's just like you try so many things, they're all a bunch of zeros. Because I always hit that brick wall. I just couldn't find the satisfaction I was looking for. All those zeros, and then I started practicing Krishna consciousness, it put the one in front of all of those zeros. And everything in my life fell into place. I finally felt that deep satisfaction that I had never experienced in anything else I had done. Everything they said in there answered all the questions I ever had that I didn't even think there were answers to. In 2003, I got a phone call from my son. I had not seen him his whole life, and then he called. And he lives in Raleigh.
I remember this very clearly. My father, when he was suffering with his brain tumor, would have extremely terrible headaches. And I remember him asking Jesus to make them stop. And they would stop.
I laid my hands on them and I said, Lord, you've got to pay this, because I can't. And the next day I got a refund check from an insurance policy I'd had like 2 or 3 years before, some fluke. And it was to the penny, the exact amount of that bill.
I got really tired of doctors, and I decided that I was going to pray.
I mean, we've prayed for people and had them get up that haven't walked in 4 or 5 years that were in a wheelchair, and I've seen them get up and just take off, man, just take off running. I mean, I've actually been there and done that.
And we look up and we see an angel. And I do mean like his wings, his body. It was like light.
Now, I've prayed for money before and didn't get it.
Now, do you still go to the doctor, though, if you have other things?
Oh,
or?
sure, of course. I mean, God's got a reason for everyone. He's got the doctors here for us.
I wonder about that. What happens when the Lord's not answering my prayers? And I think to myself, maybe He is answering it by not doing something.
Prayer is talking to God. Meditation is listening to God, being receptive, being open. Prayer is sort of dictatorial. It's almost like sitting on Santa Claus's lap saying, I want this, I want that.
This other, it was my voice and I can control it, but it was a different language. It just starts coming out of my mouth and I'm thinking, wow, this is awesome, this is God.
And I apologize to you.
You did.
That's what you wanted
And this
me
is
to
what,
say.
no, but I wanted to say thank you very much for apologizing. And well, we can all get along. It doesn't matter. We can all get along.
If you're in the infantry, there's really
She said I was a teabagger, and at this point in time, I don't. She said
that's a derogatory term, right? What do you mean?
What's not
Jesus
faith-based?
Christ was not a. There's no faith that Jesus Christ never existed. What part of that is faith-based?
Where's the documentation? Where's the documentation that says that he is the
Where's his
Messiah?
birth certificate?
I could ask the same thing about Barack Obama. So let's,
I was given warnings in Facebook inboxes about George. I'm here to say, George, I do not feel threatened by you. I consider you a friend.
Yeah, exactly.
And those warnings,
I'm shivering.
those warnings were so wrong. They were so wrong.
What's wrong with you?
Because
Cold hands, warm heart.
this is a good man. He's a good man. We don't agree, religiously
But we agree to disagree.
or even politically, but we can still be friends.
Happy New Year! Happy New Year!
2011 may be better.
Amen.
How many days has it been, Stephen?
103.
Yeehaw! Going up, Jimmy. Hey!
Well, there's a lot less people here than when it started, huh?
Yeah.
I've been here ever
The
since
mission's
the first
accomplished
day.
too. So. This is the most important thing on there. Yep.
What's that?
And my combat ribbon, combat infantry badge.
Oh, wow.
For getting shot at and
And Father, we just ask that we would be worthy of the title of Christian. Lord, I thank you for all those people that I've met during the past few months, for the trials, the problems, the hardships that we've gone through that has formed great and lasting friendships and relationships. Lord, we thank you for everything that you've allowed to happen in this little town of King. We thank you for the example that we were able to be to many people throughout the entire nation.
So George, that's it, huh?
Yeah.
Time to head to California, huh?
Yep. My new chapter in life, buddy.
Get right up. Let's go running.
Yeah. Well, the gun that I normally carry is a bigger one, and that's like not. Well, yeah, I'm happy with how it came out. However, I wish it would have been more defined. If I could surmise it all, maybe even a sentence. Leave these people with their illusions. They think they got it under control, but they don't.
This is the victory rally reunion service, but this is, I guess, kind of the end of it. This is just celebrating, the victory and, having the flag flying again.
I look at it this way. Maybe I lit the match, but you guys carried the flame.
It wasn't just local support. We had support throughout the state. We had support throughout the other states. We were just a landing ground and a starting ground for this victory. Don't let nobody take your rights away. Stand up. The First Amendment has been rewrote, amended, manipulated from what it originated from. If you don't understand it, read it and know what it means.
Many historians look at this and say, in many respects, this is the most revolutionary thing that ever happens in America. And the biggest thing we give the world is the notion of religious freedom and the notion that we can have robust government without a church, and we can have robust religion without government support. And that's equally important.
Politically is putting the right people in the right places, not just bodies in right places. Remember that when you go, then you vote.
Jefferson says, yeah, I know you can amend the Constitution. You can amend the Constitution and make this a Christian nation. I'm telling you, not only is it a very bad idea, but it's wrong in the sense that the right to religious freedom is more fundamental than even the Constitution.
And this little town became a battlefield for this country.
But the final outcome is what God wanted. The flag is back on the pole. Praise God. And that's what we all wanted.
My former dean that hired me, and I came down to help him start the divinity school here, says he's convinced that if the First Amendment were up for a vote now, it'd be defeated. I'm afraid he may be right.
Let us always be mindful, Lord, of that flag that brought us together and what that flag represents, your wonderful Son and our Savior, the Messiah. No matter what happens in our life, Lord, let us never forget that we were a part of history and it was all about Jesus.
It's stuff like this where we have the 1 week and they still have to shove it down our throats. They can't let it go from my father. They can't let it go. They have to be here as he walks up here with the Christian flag. He can't let it go. I'm done.
But they gone up to Calvary. I was in Washington last weekend for Rolling Thunder.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And you met maybe a presidential campaign,
I just seen her go down the street. She's a good-looking woman.
Who is that?
Sarah Palin.
All right.
She's a good-looking woman.
Now, would you vote for her?
Yes, in a heartbeat.
Freedom of religion could be Catholic, could be Methodist, but not if they're coming over here to this country and worshiping their God from their former country. Why did they leave?
Right. So each country should just have their own particular God and not have them all mixed together into one country?
That's what I think, yes. I think it is an abomination unto God.
Actually, that being on your neck is just perfect because it just shows exactly what all of this was really about. Because you and your white Christian hate being out here with you and your rebel flag on your neck. Oh no,
I don't hate
a lot of Christianity.
No. Those were the crosses that was inside the little name plate that was questioned.
Two little metal crosses were like on the side of the placard.
The Christian flag is heritage. This, the Confederate flag is heritage. That doesn't mean hate.
She asked, what are these little things in here? How did they get in here, the little crosses?
The thing all started back in Africa. They sold their own people into slavery. We didn't go over there looking for slaves.
And he said, yes, I put them in there. I said, why?
The good landowners, the good Southerners that did have slaves, for the most part, were better to them than what they had in Africa or what they had at home. But you always hear the bad side of it. You never hear the good side of it.
And she goes, well, why? Why would you do that? And he said, because this is a Christian flagpole.
If you look back in Genesis, it talks about Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Well, so the story goes, one of them committed a really bad sin, and God told him that race would be punished.
No, it's not. There's no flag on the pole.
I wouldn't have had slaves only under those circumstances. As if I had land, a lot of cotton, a lot of tobacco, a lot of the homegrown, everything the South had that the North didn't have. We needed people to work the land and so forth.
She said, well, you can't just put them in there or something like that to that effect. And then that's when he said, well, you take them out of there, I'll break your arm. I was like, oh, no.
He said, yes, I put them in there, and if you take them out, I'll break your arm.
And he talked about you cannot be a Christian and also have the feelings of racism. You just can't. And it's so true.
A few words back and forth, and told him that I was going to call the police, and he got in his truck and left.
She had been mean to us, and she really wasn't. Right. She was angry because she thinks somebody put something in that placard, which would be wrong to me.
Right.
I mean, they're weak.
And did you tell the police what Moses had said, or did they ask you?
And they didn't ask.
And then the police came, and they told me that since he put a condition on his threat, whereas he said, if you touch them, I'll break your arm, that they couldn't charge him with communicating threats or anything like that. Which really, I really would never charge him anyway, because I didn't want him to be arrested. I mean, he's an old man. I just thought, the police might come out here and be like, hey, hey, it's just a flag.
I chose to change the flags that I had originally chosen. And then there was just an uproar over that. One of my weeks, which I had not really looked at, all I went by was the week number. I didn't know which week my 4 weeks were. It just had an assigned number, and so that one of my weeks actually fell on the week of 9/11. And I had chosen to fly a Muslim flag on that week. But I do believe because of the sensitivity that was attached to that week, and speaking with some other veterans who are also members of the local America's Legion 290, which I'm a member of, we felt that the best thing to do was just to fly no flag that week. And actually then I chose not to fly flags in any other weeks, because the original intent was that we fly no religious flag at all. So to fly a religious flag then would be counterproductive to what the intent of the original movement was. So, but still, people were down protesting, and that just disturbs me that if it was not their flag, then we have to go down and say something. We demand that this be put up, and it's just the hypocrisy of their views is just so evident, and I think that's what's disturbing most of all.
This is a burlesque show, and so all of the acts really are playing off the Christmas theme.
I'm a Christian. I'm an open-minded Christian.
Open-minded Christian. Very good.
I'm not Baptist. No, actually, I grew up Baptist, so that's why I'm making fun of it.
You did? Okay.
And in about 5th grade, I was like, I'm surrounded by hypocrites. Goodbye. And then my best friend since 1st grade told me I was going to hell because I wasn't going to church anymore, and I was like, really? Because I'm not.
Everybody thinks the golden rule is a fair way to do things. And so I was thinking about how do you apply the golden rule in the church-state area, and I've kind of come up with this. It would go something like this: I must not ask government to promote my religion if I don't want government to promote somebody else's religion. And I must not permit government to harm somebody else's religion if I don't want government to harm my religion.
I hope you find some people that agree with leaving that flag down and interview them. I would like to know their thought process. I really would.